This is one of the diagrams that was released by some of the whistleblowers and the Looking Glass project. It had an uncanny similarity to the structure that he was showing directly behind him. And what was he saying? He was saying that the AI has used the Looking Glass technology to influence, or all technology in general, to influence human beings to begin creating and building it so that it could begin kind of a feedback loop, right? So where does it all start? It all started in 1957. Just let me finish this last point, right?
Yeah.
It started in 1957 when the Sputnik went up into space and they picked up weird radio signals that were coming from the cosmos directed directly at Earth, right? And this is something that set the whole thing in motion. Essentially, when they realized that there was some kind of a broadcast signal coming, and Eugene's talking about, you talk about ancient civilizations and whatnot, and I talk about this, of course, in the Looking Glass, Inner Looking Glass. But there's something that's called the Cassini space probe. It went out to Saturn and it picked up from Saturn's rings, also emanating these strange sounds, these radio frequencies. And other researchers like David Talbot, and then later David Icke picked up on Talbot stuff, and Velikovsky's and others. They were saying that essentially there's this what they call a Saturn moon matrix, where this is actually really going on. There's actually this signal coming from Saturn, seemingly broadcast or rebroadcast from the moon. And when they put the Sputnik up there, they went, holy cow, right? It's really, really happening, right? So this was, I think, the very, very beginnings of something which they set in motion a whole field of research, which began very, very early on. I went and checked that. I thought, okay, now Eugene could be a crackpot, right? You never know, right? Because you don't know, he's all over the place. But I started looking at his research, and I was actually really blown away. He started revealing stuff like, here, for example, this will blow your mind. Here's a document he published that shows on April 25th, 1963, members and affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. This is a memo that went out to a group of people. This is confidential material that he cracked and put out there, which is talking about an intergalactic computer network, which is happening, which is already in place, right? So this was the start of all of this sort of the realization that there's AI, the realization that there's frequencies, and eventually the culmination of a whole branch of science that would get into using frequencies to manipulate human consciousness. And the proof of that, he lays out all the evidence. Like here's another piece of evidence. He's got a CIA document, right? Central Intelligence Agency, released on the 18th of September, 1995. Perception is demonstrated to have occurred below the threshold of conscious sensory experience when a person responds to a stimulus too weak in intensity or too short in duration for him to be aware of it. Individual behavior without awareness of the stimulus, of which subliminal perception is a subtype, has been subject of study in psychological laboratories for at least 70 years. Okay? 70
Frank, I got
years. Okay, jump in.
no. Speaking of signs, I got goosebumps. I've been having goosebumps for the last 10 minutes because I could always put this in words, but I'm not a tech guy, so I couldn't seeing and now understanding better the technology that does it. But basically, this very, very ancient understanding that our consciousness is the creative force,
Yeah,
and it needs to be manipulated and entrapped for this whole matrix to continue working, and that's what they're doing in more and more and more sophisticated ways. But
absolutely.
talking about perception, I remember this experiment where they put people in front of a screen and they would measure their brains in any way they could, and they would project things on the screen, images, right, different kinds,
Yeah.
and then they would measure the reactions of the people. And so what they found out was that the reaction in the brain and the body happened an instant, I don't know how many milliseconds, but it happened before the picture was projected onto the screen, which tells you we're tuning in a much different way than what we think we're tuning in with. And that's, I think, that's the level where this communication is constantly happening. This is
Yeah.
it's nuts how we know, and this is what we're going to get to, Frank. We know truth when we tune in, and then we reverse engineer the truth in a way that we can perceive it with our human minds. But we first have to know the truth before we can reverse engineer it. And people think it's a journey there. It's a journey backwards, really. We're taking the journey backwards here.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
does this blow your mind sometimes?
It's just, I'm telling you, it really does blow my mind every single day. Like it doesn't matter, you know. And the fact is, it's another proof that you're on the right timeline is when you like when you and I just kind of, you know, threw a couple of ideas at each other. Like, the next time we talk, let's talk about this. And I'm like, okay, but I need more. Like, I've got a research archive, but I want more stuff, new stuff, right? And bang, just like it just happened. Like, amazingly, out of two events that are about to happen in my life, both of those were given fruit in a sense that I was provided with information. And in this case, some of it came from Eugene Irvin, and kudos to him for being out there on a limb and putting this information together. In fact, he's put some of this information out, like these screenshots that I just showed you. He put a presentation out 8 years ago, right? So this guy he's definitely tapping into something. And what you realize is that, like, here, look at this. This is something out of the webinar, right? It shows you that the key U.S. research efforts in mind control have been going on starting at Duke University since 1930, right? And here's a bit of a timetable. This is a CIA document which was eventually surfaced, which talks about the timetable up until the 80s, 1984, I believe. Right. So, but a lot more has happened since then. Right. In fact, you know, here's one that talks about, here's another one that you can see the link down below if you guys want to check out that presentation that Eugene did.
You deserve the truth, but big tech does not want you to hear it. So we built our own Inspired platform on the inspiredchannel.com. To watch the full video and more, just click the link in the video description or the pinned comment.